Okay. Hi, Ta. Hello,
Evening.
hello. Hello from Alabama. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for part three. I hope you enjoyed parts 1 and 2. I know that many have because we got a lot of feedback, positive feedback. Thank you so much. Uh, and of course, there was a lot of discussion. A lot of discussion comes many questions. So, Tati, before we start, is there anything you wanted to add to our conversation that we had over the last couple of weeks about the the importance of the mitzvahs, the commandments, the expectations from God to every member of the human race?
Just that we're exploring the most fundamental principles of goodness, morality. Most people would say, without the Ten Commandments, we're in big trouble. We've got nothing. All morality is based on the Ten Commandments. Actually, it's all based on the Seven Commandments. For example, observing the Shabbos is not the most fundamental of all principles of morality. But having courts of law, which is one of the Seven Commandments, well, without that, we're lost. Anarchy. So the seven, those are the building blocks of civilized life.
That I think is the major change that a lot of people have to work through, and they're having a lot of challenges in really uh, reorienting their way of thinking. Right? What do you mean? I shouldn't focus on the Ten Commandments. That's un-American. And all of a sudden, we come up with this suggestion, with this idea that you really have to change your way of thinking because that's not what God said.
It's not a very dramatic change. There's no harm if you want to keep 10 commandments. But again, if we're talking about fundamentals, there are seven.
So,
10 commandments, actually, if you read them carefully and responsibly, the first of the Ten Commandments is, I am God, your God. Now, some Bibles don't do that. Some Bibles skip that and consider the first commandment, you shall have no other gods, which is a strange beginning. Other than what? But if you read the first commandment, I am God, your God, it's followed by the words, who took you out of Egypt. I am God, your God, who took you out of Egypt. Obviously, these Ten Commandments are addressed to the Jewish people whom God took out of Egypt. So if God didn't take you out of Egypt, you can skip to the next chapter or go back to the first chapter. So, although it's not a dramatic change or difference, the few details that the seven commandments have that the 10 don't. For example, cruelty to animals, not eating a limb off a living animal. That's not one of the 10 commandments, but it is one of the seven. And to have courts of law is not one of the 10 commandments, but it is one of the seven. And those are crucial. 10 commandments without courts of law are totally useless for society. So it's an important topic.
I think what I hear you saying to the non-Jews who are listening to this is what you've been saying to Jews for many, many years, and that is Stop being religious and start focusing on God. If you want to do what sounds like it's religious, well, then wonderful, but it's not serving God. God needs us to do certain things. And when we know what they are, then we're much more moral, much more in line with making this world a place for God. Something like
which,
that.
which should be our definition of morality. Moral means in the service of God's plan. Immoral means obstructing God's plan. There's no other definition.
So let's start with what a number of people have asked in different ways. What are you saying? What does Torah say to non-Jews with regard to how is my service of God defined? Am I a second-class citizen in God's eyes? Am I only doing, mop-up work? In various ways, people have asked this question, like, "Oh, I don't get to follow the Ten Commandments. What should I do? What is meaningful, and how do I know that I'm serving God?"
Sounds like they didn't listen to our first class.
So let's focus on the last part. How do I know if I'm serving God?
Have these 7 commandments tacked to your
Refrigerator.
and check them off. See, that is the biggest gift that God has given us. Commandments. Commandments means I will not have you guessing. I won't keep it a mystery so that you'll never really know whether you're good or bad, whether you're doing right or doing wrong, and live your entire life with anxiety and with questions and with uncertainty. That would be cruel. And I've heard from many people who try really hard to be good. They can't sleep at night. Because the more sincere they are and the harder they try to be good, the more the question looms. So am I? How do I know? I lost my temper yesterday. That's it. I'm going to hell. It's a terrible predicament to put people into. Be good, don't be bad, or you're going to get it. Do what? Do what? Just behave yourself. Come on. That's torture. So God did us the ultimate favor. He communicated in detail, leaving no room for doubts or for mysteries. And that's why we need to talk about this. Everybody knows about God. Everybody wrestles or dismisses or questions or suffers from this notion of God. It's not meant to cause more trouble in the world. It's meant to be the solution to our problems, not a whole new problem. So there should not be any room for doubts or for uncertainties or vagaries. That's what a Bible is all about. The removal of doubt. So that if you want to be good, are you or are you not? So when we know that we have 7 commandments, if you observe these 7 commandments, you are righteous. If you're not observing, so observe. Figure out which one you're missing and fix it. No mysteries. Obviously, there are gray areas in life. That's what we have intelligence for. But we're not living in a twilight zone. We can always be better. Our intentions can be more sincere. Those are subjective issues. How much do you love God? I don't know. How much do you love your husband or your wife or your mother or your children? But In terms of instruction, it's not an instruction if it's not clear. Actually, this guy had a dream. It disturbed him. I forget the details, it doesn't really matter. But he woke up disturbed by the dream. So he calls me and he says, "What is God trying to tell me?" I say, God doesn't try to tell you anything. When he wants to communicate, he speaks a fine English. So if he wanted to tell you something, he would have told you, you would have understood it, and there would be no mystery. The fact that you have no idea what that dream means proves that it's a dream. Let it go. So this idea that God speaks mysterious words in riddles and no, he doesn't.
So that,
Especially, yeah.
that actually leads to another question that was asked. Does God still speak to us? Because there are people who are sure that they were told by God what to do.
It's kind of a euphemism. Every time I have a moral impulse, every time I think I should be good, that's God talking to me. Well, not me personally, but that's God's influence on the world. God is the source of all goodness, and when I tap into goodness, I'm hearing his voice. Was it a pre-recorded voice? Maybe. Is that a tape that plays all day long, hoping for somebody to hear it? Maybe. So when people say God spoke to me, they usually mean I had a godly thought occurred to me. So if in fact God is speaking to you, how would you know? I'm sure there are crazy people who are go out to destroy the world and they think God told them to do it. How do you tell the real thing from the insanity? Well, there's the answer itself. If God tells you to kill somebody, you know it's wrong because God already said, "Thou shalt not." So that's another benefit of having very clear, unambiguous descriptions of God's will. So we know what is or what isn't in line with God. Leave it vague, and all of a sudden you have every kind of nutty claim, false prophets, right? There's a whole chapter in the Torah about it. How do you know a false prophet? How do you know if you're a false prophet? So the Torah says, if somebody comes along, claims to be speaking in God's voice, in God's behalf, and he predicts the future accurately, impressive. But he asks you to do something you know God doesn't want you to do. Well, then you can be sure he is not speaking in God's name. He is not a prophet. He is a corrupter. So don't be impressed with his predictions or even his miracles.
But is it fair to say that false prophets can be successful sometimes because the Torah is not abundantly clear? So sometimes they say that it's talking in riddles and it really means this. And you have to go to your rabbi, and your rabbi is going to tell you, no, it really means that.
Maybe in the early years, there were translation problems, language barriers. It's all been worked out. I don't think anyone in the world can actually say, God didn't mean thou shalt not murder, like murder. He meant thou shalt not murder, like in, murder. Of course, we have to know, what does worshiping other gods mean? In other words, how do you apply that? What is another god? But any other god you know is wrong. So you have to match the fact with the principle. Well, that's always the case. Even in a civil court, if you're accused of murder, we have to look at the facts and see if it's murder one, if it's negligence, if it's unintentional, if it's insanity. But you know that murder is wrong. See, and that's another thing. The mistranslation, thou shalt not kill. Wrong. Wrong. Because God says, do not stand on the blood of your friend if he's being pursued and his life is being threatened. Save him by killing the attacker, if necessary. So you can't say that God said don't kill. God said don't murder. Murder means unprovoked, unjustified taking of a life. But self-defense, that's godly. Capital punishment when deserved, that's godly. We're a little overly cautious because we're terrified of killing the wrong guy, because we're fallible ourselves. But that a murderer deserves to die, of course he does, in principle.
It would seem like murder is low-hanging fruit. I mean, of course, everybody, at least theoretically, agrees that murder is wrong. There are more complicated issues where it would be proper, correct, to say that if you want to understand what God wants you to do, you have to turn to the sages of Israel.
Yes. If you want the details, if you want to be sure that you're translating correctly. This guy said to me, science tells us that the world is billions of years old, but the Bible says the world was created in 6 days. Not a problem. The Hebrew word for 6 can mean 6 millennia, it can mean 6 eras. Doesn't necessarily mean 6 days as we know it.
This is what the guy is saying to you.
He says, how do you know it means 6 days? I said, how do you know it means 6? How do you know that the Hebrew word sheish or sheishes means 6, anything? Because the rabbis told you. So trust them. The word sheish can also mean marble. So how do you know? You know because there's a tradition. This has been studied for thousands of years, and it doesn't get more complicated. It gets more better understood and more attainable and reachable, relevant. Otherwise, we're not learning, we're going backwards. So yes, you have to rely on the original experts, like in any other subject. You have to rely on the true experts, not someone who read the book 3 or 4 times. It doesn't make you an expert. A very good example is honor your father and mother. Okay, I'm willing. What should I do? write poems about them? What do you do to honor your parents? Bow to them every time they walk in? Put a crown on their head? What do you do to honor them? So let's get down to specifics. Your father wants you to vote for his candidate, President of the United States. Big decision. He wants you to vote for his candidate. You don't want to. Violating the fifth commandment. Your mother wants you to marry this guy she met at the supermarket. Or you want to marry a girl you met at the supermarket and your mother says, over my dead body. Which is a very nasty expression that should never be used. And you go ahead and marry her anyway, violating the fifth commandment? Yes or no?
Or, as somebody asked, my father has been verbally abusive every day of my life, and now he wants me to come over for dinner. Do I have to go? Bible says I gotta respect him.
No, you got to get something out of him, at least a good meal. These are very good questions. So without the rabbis, we hear the words, we understand the commandment, we have no idea how to apply it. That's why we're having these conversations. So your mother says, don't marry this girl or marry this girl. Are you obligated? No. You're not honoring your mother by not marrying the person you want. And you're not honoring your father by not voting for his candidate. But if your mother says, can you take the garbage down? And you say, I'm too busy, you have violated the fifth commandment. Because to honor parents literally means do menial tasks for them so that they don't have to. So if you see your mother carrying the garbage out to the back and you don't take it from her and carry it for her, you're violating the fifth commandment. If they're struggling with a suitcase, if they're trying to get their coat on, if they have to get up from the table to get the ketchup or whatever, you're supposed to be doing those things for them. That's honoring parents. Do the menial tasks so that they don't have to. But who you marry, who your friends are, they may have some good advice. Don't dismiss it cavalierly. They know you pretty well, but you're not obligated to marry their choice or not marry your choice. So yes, we need the opinion of the experts.
Those examples were in the case of a mostly healthy relationship. You want to talk for a second about respecting parents or honoring parents in an otherwise toxic relationship?
Any relationship that leads to dishonor must be avoided. In other words, if you're home and being home leads to arguments, leads to your disrespecting your parents, then you honor them by moving out. Don't stay there and continue to battle and to insult and to. No. Now, that can be because you simply have a terrible relationship or because the parents are mentally or emotionally difficult due to illness or whatever it is. So you hire somebody to take care of them, but you can't be there because it's going to end up being disrespectful. So out of respect, you put some distance between you. That's one of the ways of respecting. If I can't be civil with my parents, I'm better off avoiding. Send a card. Send a text. Now, if your father is a good father, just not a good person. In other words, if you see your father sinning, doing something dishonest, something forbidden, are you still obligated to honor? Yeah. Why not? Must parents be perfect saints before they get some honor from their children? So, for example, part of honoring your parents is not to ever call your father or mother by their first name. You can see the honor aspect there. Calling them by their first name makes it a little too familiar. On first name basis, like your buddies, your equals, you're never equals. They gave you life. You gave them bills. So you're never going to be equal. So don't forget that. Put your parents up on a pedestal because that's where they are. And even if they're not saints and they don't have halos, but as far as you're concerned, they gave you life. So unless you're finding it difficult to be civil and respectful of your parents, there's no reason you stop honoring them. They don't have to be saints. They just have to be parents.
I want to follow that right into how to be a parent, because that was another question that came in. But first, I think I've heard you say this, and I've certainly learned it in other places. There is there's a huge language problem happening right here, right now. Because when somebody said to me, how can I respect my parents? I don't respect them. My father did this, my mother did that. I don't respect them. And I realize that the wording is throwing us off. And it's probably true in so many areas where what we think we mean when we say one word, and then we quote the Torah and we say, oh, the Torah says this, but it's not the same word. That probably is proving to be a very tricky problem.
It was, but it shouldn't be anymore because everything has been clarified.
No, I mean in English.
Yes, yes. The commandment is to honor, not to respect. Of course, disrespecting is dishonoring, but it's the dishonoring that is forbidden. In other words, respect is an opinion, a perception, a subjective response. You can't command that. Just like you can't command love your parents. But honoring is doable. It's not subjective. Carry their bags. Bring the food to the table. Lighten their burden. That's very, very clear. Don't increase their burden. Don't ever ask your parents to run an errand for you. You're supposed to be running their errands. So that's doable even if you don't respect your parents. It's like in the good old days, I don't know, do you remember when people had respect for a president even though they didn't like him?
Not going to get into it right now, but I remember the day it ended.
Well, that was a long time ago. That was like 5 presidents ago. But the point is, you can honor someone for for a single contribution that they made, which is significant, and not respect any other part of their life, which is perfectly legitimate. In fact, unavoidable. Everybody forms an opinion. You can't ask children to never form an opinion about their parents, except in this case. So, inevitably, we're going to see the imperfections and the failings of our parents. How should we handle that? As long as it doesn't prevent me from honoring them, everybody's got their problems. They're going to have to handle their problems, but it's not going to stop me from being a son or a daughter and doing what a son and daughter are supposed to do. I had this teenage girl say she was really rebellious and angry, and she said, I am not going to let my mother ruin my life. I said, that's good. That's a good, healthy attitude. You honor your mother no matter what she does. Because if you stop honoring her, now your life is ruined. Any daughter, any son who can't honor their parents is a failure as a son or a daughter. And that's why parents have to allow their children to honor them, no matter how humble you are. Don't deprive your children of a huge mitzvah and a very healthy human activity. So that would be a great rebellion. My mother is crazy. My mother is hard to respect, but I'm going to honor her because that's what a daughter does. There's my rebellion. You are not going to derail me.
We said at the outset that every one of these 7 mitzvahs and all of the other mitzvahs deserve a whole series all by themselves. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of any one particular one, but now that we've brought it up, let's spend a minute on the other way. Children are not going to honor us if we don't teach them how to honor us. So how do we teach our children to put us on a pedestal without putting ourselves on a pedestal?
Well, in some way, you do have to put yourself on a pedestal, which means don't talk to your children as if you're equals. You're the authority. You're the responsible party. You're the adult. Well, act like one. It's very common and very painful to watch how parents run around their children like satellites around the earth. Your children are the satellite, not you. You're the center of their universe. Don't shirk that responsibility. So when you talk to your children, talk as an adult with a certain amount of confidence that you know right from wrong, you know better, and it's your responsibility to guide your children. Constantly asking, so do you want to do this? You want to do that? You want to go to the park? You want to eat this? You want to eat that? You're not the butler. You're the parent. Obviously, that doesn't mean that your children are your property and that you can do with them as you wish. But what you're supposed to do for your children is parent them, guide them, protect them. Don't ask them what they want to do constantly. So the good parents are parents whose entire life is based on the child. Take them here, take them there, give them this, give them that. So your child looks at you and says, get a life. Stop following me around to gym and to piano lessons and to tennis lessons and karate lessons. Don't you have a life of your own? Get a life. Get a life that I would be envious of and want to step into your shoes when I get older. Be a role model, not my personal valet. So not only do we have to convince children to accept the authority of the parents, we have to convince parents that they've got some authority and they should use it. See, here's a serious problem. We can't spank our children. We can't. Not we shouldn't. Sometimes maybe we should, but we can't. They fight back. So what changed? You talk to older people, old people, and they tell you, oh, if I did that to my father, if I said that to my mother, whoa, would I get a whooping. And they always say it with a smile, almost always, like fond memories. The spanking worked back then, unless it was over the top and out of control. Then it's not a spanking, then it's a beating. But a disciplinary spanking worked. Now it doesn't work. So now we can't do it. The reason it doesn't work is, like you say, who authorized you to be spanking me? So they retaliate. And they're usually bigger than you. So you got to watch it. In other words, if you are the authority and I misbehaved, I'll take the punishment and life makes sense. I did the crime, I do the time. But if you're not the authority, then what are you doing? Who are you to be hitting me? Okay, the result is no more spanking. But look at the problem now. Instead of spanking, we send our children to their room. If you don't have authority, who are you to send me to my room? So I'll go to my room if there's a television there and a closet full of toys. Otherwise, the same reason you can't spank me, you also can't send me to my room. Who are you? So either we have some authority or we have none. None. So what happens is you tell your child to go to his room, he says no, so you got to spank him. We're not getting anywhere. You're grounded. Oh yeah. Who are you? So what gave parents authority back then? The most powerful authority that parents had came from the Bible. No question about it. Psychologically, parents who knew that they have the authority by divine decree spoke with confidence. People who speak with confidence gain the authority. It's true everywhere. You have 10 friends sitting around in a room debating something. Who wins the debate? Whoever speaks with the most confidence, not the guy who yells the loudest. Confidence gives you an air of authority. We're not confident. We don't have confidence in raising our children the way our grandparents had. So we're kind of hesitant. Children pick that up immediately, and they sense that you're not sure about what you're saying. So their response, nonverbal response, is work it out and get back to me when you're sure. Meantime, I'll do whatever I want.
And then that's a widespread issue of parents who want to be their best friends, their children's best friend, and so on. And then there are parents on the other side. There are some comedians you're not allowed to quote anymore, but I'll do it anyway. I brought you into this world, I'd take you out. Right? The parent who, knowing, some people know that they're too tough, but they feel like if I don't do this, then I'm not being a parent. How do you draw the line?
Well, the first question always is it working? If you put your foot down and you take a tough stand and you won't put up with nonsense, is it working? Or are you destroying your kid? I mean, look at the evidence. So, whatever your method is, if it doesn't work, it's not a good method. Try something else. If it is working, well, great. Your children will look back at it with fond memory. Children desperately miss that security. The ability to say, my father told me and my father knows. Wow. What that does for the kid, never mind for the father. Where do our children's security come from these days? And without security, kids don't have a chance. So if children grow up in a home where they hear their parents arguing, there goes the security. Kids are sitting in school, teacher is asking them to concentrate on 14th century France. And the kid is saying, are my parents still married? Am I going to come home and find a disaster? So I'm really not interested in the 14th century France. The security is gone, everything is gone. The child who feels my mother is too busy to pay any attention to me, my father couldn't care less, that's it. It's all downhill after that. So it's not like we're trying to impose on children something that they won't tolerate. It's the opposite. They need it desperately, they want it desperately. They're not getting it. Well, my kid is rebelling. It didn't start with your kid's rebellion. It started with a frightening experience that left your child resentful because you scared the life out of him by arguing in front of him. But that we're drifting from the commandments to child psychology.
Psychology. The question that seemed to follow almost every other question was a very American question, I think. So really, so if I do that, I'll go to heaven? That's all it takes?
That's a very legitimate observation. It can't be that simplistic and it can't be that childish. We're not talking Santa Claus. You do this, you get a reward. You do that, you get a spanking in heaven. It doesn't work that way, obviously. We don't judge people like that. People do many things, many good things, many bad things, and many okay things. Things. How do we judge people? By the weight, by the volume, not by the piece. More good than bad is a pretty good person. Much more good than bad is a special person. Much more bad than good, dangerous. So we don't judge each step, each act independently. You put it all on a scale, on a balancing scale. Put the good stuff on one side of the scale, the bad stuff on the other side of the scale, and you judge by which outweighs the other. So you have people who do a lot of bad things, but they're not keeping count. So they don't remember the last bad thing they did. And they do something bad, you say, for this you're going to get punished. For one act, I get punished? No, not really. It's for being in the habit of this bad act. You forget that you've been doing this since you were 13. So it's not something a human being can keep track of. You can't keep a ledger. Today I sinned twice. Today I did 2 good things. You can't do that. You don't remember. You're not really the judge. You can exaggerate your faults. You can exaggerate your virtues. Only God can judge, and we leave it to him.
You're saying something so, I think, very, very important for a lot of people. But first, let me clarify. You're talking about non-Jews going to heaven, right? It's not just Jews.
Right.
So there are a lot of people who do know what they've done wrong. And unfortunately, many people do keep score on themselves. And they are sure that God will never forgive them. You're telling them that there's still a chance to go to heaven? In other words, this seems to me to be a very American obsession. Not that it's wrong about contemplating your relationship with God, but this idea that, am I worthy to go to heaven? Is this what I need to do to get to heaven? Is this what I need to do to enhance my relationship with God? And then I hear you say, well, 1, 2, 10 bad things is not the end of the world. Really, is God so forgiving?
I didn't say anything about forgiving. I think the way God judges, you did 10 terrible things, you did 100 really good things. Is God pleased or disappointed? He's pleased. I mean, you run a company, you run a factory, and you hire a worker, and he makes 10 mistakes, but he produces hundreds of wonderful products. Are you going to fire him? You're going to end up with nobody. So it's not a matter of forgiving. That's a whole different subject. And yes, God is forgiving. The nicest part of it. But before you even get to the forgiveness, how does God measure you? He doesn't look at every mistake you make as if that's it. It's like, so what else have you done? Now, is there a sin for which you're absolutely gone? It is so heinous, it's so terrible that there's no way, No matter how much good you do after that, you're doomed. Can you think of such a sin?
Shouldn't be.
Hmm?
There shouldn't be.
There shouldn't be, because goodness is much more real than evil. Holiness is much more powerful than evil. So you can't have an evil that is so powerful it wipes out all the good you ever did. That would mean that evil is God. It's not. Now, there are sins for which the punishment is death. But let's put it in perspective. What does it mean, death penalty? In God's courtroom. The death penalty means uh, you were a guest in my house, but you did something so destructive that you can't stay in the house anymore. You're no longer welcome. You're too destructive. That's what we mean by death penalty. How many times does God let you mess up the furniture, destroy a few objects in the house, dirty it up, and doesn't throw you out? You're still welcome. So people say, God is so judgmental, God is so strict. No, he's not. He lets you get away with all sorts of stuff. And you're still welcome. He's hoping that tomorrow you'll stop being destructive and maybe even start fixing what you destroyed. I don't know if that's called forgiveness, that's called realistic. You created us with a good inclination and an evil inclination. So, do you expect perfect saints? No. Besides, saints are a little boring. They're too predictable. So, the righteous Gentile has a portion in the world to come. A portion in the world to come is no simple matter. It means that you achieve or you acquire eternity. If you have a portion in the world to come, you never die. That's an achievement. What does dying mean? Go on like this all night long. What does dying mean? Dying means your soul leaves the body and loses its identity. Nothing just stops existing. We know that from science, and we know that from simple logic. It just gone. When a person dies, the soul continues to live, meaning it continues to be itself. It retains its personality. You're still related to the people you were related to. You still have all the memories that you accumulated. You still have the sense of humor or no sense of humor, depending on. The complete death would mean your soul lost its personality, lost its human form, and is now just generic energy. It can't disappear, but it can transform. So the death that we don't want to experience is the loss of identity. Some people say, if I just end and there's nothing after death, that's fine with me. but I don't want to continue existing and not be me. That's what we mean by heaven. Heaven means you remain yourself. You are you. If you're not you anymore, that's not good. So, no, we don't become generic angels, all look alike, behave alike, sound alike, flutter around alike. Every soul remains its original personality. If you're a cranky old guy, that's what you are in heaven. If you're a pleasure to talk to, that's what you are in heaven. But you're you. Now, how does a human being, a human soul that is mortal, how does it achieve eternity, immortality? By serving God. You acquire eternity based on the godliness of your life, the godliness of your behavior. So as you act godly, you acquire some godly energies, and that makes you immortal. What happens if you don't acquire any immortality? Then you simply become generic energy, which means you're gone. And I think that that's what the Christian concept of eternal damnation. It never meant that you're going to continue to burn and suffer forever. That is so pointless. The only thing that can be forever is that you're gone. You're not you anymore, and you never will be again. Forever. But you're not suffering. You're just not a human being anymore.
And we say that the righteous of the nations of the world have a portion in the world to come. Is that heaven? Is that the time of Moshiach, the Messianic era? Both?
Both. Both. Obviously, if a guy died 100 years ago and he's going to be here in the times of the Messianic era, where is he now? Where's he hanging out?
In the grand waiting room.
In a honky tonk in Texas somewhere?
So that leads to the question that somebody asked. So does that mean that non-Jews are also involved in the effort to bring Mashiach?
Absolutely. In fact, we will know whether Mashiach is here or not by the way the nations of the world respond to God. The ultimate picture of messianic perfection is when all the nations serve the God of Israel with a common effort. Not in the same way. Jews will do Jewish things and non-Jews will do non-Jewish things, but the effort is common because we're each doing what God needs of us. That's the utopian principle. If there's a single nation in the world that isn't doing that, Mashiach is not here. I think it's safe to say today, Mashiach is not here.
And can non-Jews do this by helping other non-Jews serve God or by helping Jews learn about being Jewish? Yes to both.
Yes to both. Even a guy alone on an island can help bring Mashiach. First thing is don't be blasphemous. Because when you're marooned on an island, after a while, you kind of are tempted to be blasphemous. Don't give up on God. Don't turn against him. Continue to live your life as morally as you can, even though you're not influencing others directly. You're producing good vibrations, and that affects the universe.
Okay. Tati, there were a lot of questions that dealt with details, which we can get into maybe some other time. But I want to do some that seem to bring us to how we apply these mitzvahs into our lives. For example, we had a friend here in Birmingham, an elderly gentleman who was our friend for many years, and he grew up in the scrap metal business. And his father was in the scrap metal business, and he said that he remembers when his father called him one day and said, Mazel Tov, your brother just had a baby, 6 pounds, 9 ounces. And he said, really? Was that on the buying scale or the selling scale? Which I'm sure I hope he was joking. But we're talking about morality. We're talking about serving God in every aspect of our life. So if my boss said, well, yesterday's job was to sweep out the waiting room, today's job is to go murder the neighbor. Well, clearly, I'm not going to do that. But what if the boss asks me to do something a little bit just this side of immoral, like a buying scale and a selling scale? How much are we expected to apply these principles to our daily life? How much are we expected to give up to live by these principles? How do we do that?
Principles are non-negotiable in principle. If it's negotiable, it's not a principle. It's just an idle thought. All of these commandments are non-negotiable. You cannot blame somebody else. She made me do it. He made me do it. I did it to keep my job. I did it to keep my, even my life. Every German under the Nazi rule who cooperated with the excuse, I was just following orders, that's not acceptable.
Don't go there yet, because that's the next question.
Which?
Soldiers and murder.
Yeah. So there is no exceptions. If your boss asks you to do something illegal or sinful, you try to reason with him, and if not, you walk out. Don't even wait to be fired. There was a member of Knesset. What's her name again? I don't remember. But she's a member of the Israeli parliament, and they recently passed a law, that hospitals may permit non-Passover product to be given to patients during Passover. She resigned. It's the talk of town. I cannot be part of this. Gave up a position in the parliament, in the Knesset. That's morality.
So, but here in America, it's important to remember, it's important to know that legal does not automatically equal moral.
Oh, that is such a problem. We know it from the kosher laws. We have these serious concerns about the products that we eat. We want to make sure that it's kosher. Now, vegetable oil is kosher. Legally, a company may put on their label 100% vegetable oil. But it doesn't have to be 100%. That's legal. Anything less than 4% or something doesn't count. So if you have less than 4% animal oil, You can call it 100% vegetable. Why? I don't know. What's the rationale? What is that? Why 100% doesn't have to mean 100%? Dairy free doesn't mean that there's no dairy in it. And this is dangerous because people are allergic to milk. So, no, you're right. Legal does not mean right. It means you can get away with it. You can get away with all sorts of stuff.
Okay, so now I'm two questions behind. Let's go back to soldiers. A soldier, we admire those people who are ready to defend us and defend our country, and we thank them for our service. And then they come home riddled with guilt about what they did because they were commanded to do.
Interesting that soldiers, American soldiers who came back from World War II, were not riddled with guilt. They were heroes. Everybody's heroes. The first time American soldiers came back devastated was Vietnam. And that's because the government wasn't sure why they were asking you to go kill people. That's a terrible thing to do to the soldiers, especially if there's a draft. They didn't even volunteer. You drafted them at the with a threat of imprisonment, and you sent them to fight a war, and you're not even sure you should be fighting the war. You're not even sure that you have a good cause. That's a terrible thing to do. But fighting for a country is not murder. If there is a cause. Countries threaten countries, and you have to defend yourself. And it's always been this way since the dawn of time. There are certain laws of engagement, rules of engagement. You don't kill unnecessarily. You don't rape. You don't pillage. You defend your country. And the question of, what am I defending? Are we really threatened? That doesn't have to be every individual's decision. If it's a defense of the country, then it's legitimate. You're not obligated to penetrate the minds of the president or of the cabinet that decides. You got to hear the issue. If there's a threat to the country and the country needs to be defended, you defend the country. Because without that, we have total chaos, which is everybody killing everybody. And that's why peace is such an incredible virtue. Always praying for peace. Because that would be such a radical change in human behavior. Peace means I don't have to have an army because no one is going to attack me. When was the last time that happened? That's one of the things we're looking forward to in Mashiach. No need for defense, no need for swords when we can use them for plowshares. It'd be very nice for that to come about. But imagine if a country couldn't defend itself. There'd be no stop. Anyone who has a fertile piece of land, or anyone who finds a little gold on his property, that's it. invaded from all sides. Everybody wants it. So there has to be some firm borders and protection so that your citizens can go about their business without fear of being displaced at any time. So if you're not up to fighting, and if if you faint at the sight of blood, then don't go. But don't condemn the people who do. Because without that, it would be much worse.
So the soldier can be confident and find solace in the idea that a defensive war is eminently moral. A preemptive strike is also considered defensive. Fighting for your country, for the peace and safety of the people in the country, is moral. There may come a point where it is patently obvious that a government is immoral, but until that point, the soldier is doing the right thing. Did I say it right?
Right. And one of the signs that the country is immoral is when men, women, and children are all soldiers. Who are you protecting? When the men go to war to protect their families, it sounds like a war of defense. If everyone is shooting, who are you defending? Something's wrong.
Unless you're facing overwhelming numbers.
Even so, it's like a last ditch effort. You're just going to go down and there'll be nobody left. Pretty senseless. Better to surrender. So it won't be your country. But don't kill every last member of your people. In fact, a moral war is a war that is fought to a decisive victory as quickly as possible. Like a 6-day war. If God can create a world in 6 days, you should be able to finish a war in 6 days, if you know what you're doing, even against 3 armies at the same time. And that's why what's going on in Ukraine right now doesn't look good at all. It's only one army, much smaller than the Russian army, and it's going on 2 months now. Somebody is either incompetent, indecisive, or loves war.
Or all three.
Or all three.
What about
A moral war is when the men defend their wives, their children, their homes. But when the women are also fighting and the children are also fighting, wait a second. And the numbers game, not kosher. A country decides, should we enter the war? Should we fight back? Should we start a war? How many people will get killed? Not our people, the enemy. 100,000? No, I can't do that. Yeah, I don't have the heart for that. 50,000? No. 20,000? No more than 20,000? Okay, let's do it. What an immoral decision that is. And yet I saw this movie where that's exactly what the President of the United States, being a very moral guy, decided. Bring it down to less than 20 and we'll go to war. More than 20, I will not take on my conscience. Now, where did this number 20,000 come from? Is that a moral decision? Okay, let's say 20 is way too much. How about 7? 7. Kill 7 of them, that not more. That's a moral decision. It's like saying killing 7 is not going to end the war. It's not going to bring peace, but that's all I'm willing to kill. Why are you willing to kill 7 people and not even have peace? So you're just discarding 7 lives? For what? So it's a painful question, but it's an important one. You can kill 7 people and not have peace, or you can kill 7,000 but have peace. What should you do? Obviously, you kill the 7,000. But what if killing 7,000 isn't going to bring peace? Well, then don't do it. What's your justification if it doesn't bring peace? Well, how many people do I have to kill in order to make peace? Ask your enemy. Ask your enemy. What would you consider a decisive defeat that will discourage you from war for at least 40 years? Because that's the objective. So it's not a matter of how many people you want to kill. That's so heartless. The goal is you should never attack us again. What will it take to convince you not to do it again? Whatever it takes.
If going to war is moral, then it's moral, no matter how many have to die. If it's not moral, then it's not moral, even if only a few die.
Yes. In other words, if you're not defending your country and this is just going to continue on and on and on, the numbers don't matter. In other words, a smaller number is no better than a bigger number. So we're going to fight this war very morally. I don't want any more than 200 people killed per day. It's a daily quota. This means that the war will go on for at least 30 years. Very immoral. Very immoral. Because that means that 2 generations are going to grow up fighting wars. And that's all they're going to know.
But back to our original question, the poor soldier on the front line who just heard what the Torah has to say about it, what's he supposed to do? Can't say, I can't fight, it's not moral. I mean, I guess he can resign.
Yes. The good news is that many Russian soldiers in the Ukraine simply turn themselves over and say, hey, I don't want to do this. Not my idea of I don't see the justification. You never threatened us. You didn't attack us. What are we doing?
On to one more subject. I explained to somebody that keeping kosher is a very Jewish thing. God gave us certain foods we're allowed to eat, certain foods we're not allowed to eat. But it doesn't mean that everything that's not kosher is not useful or not meaningful. And therefore, for a non-Jew, when I had somebody help me get my bus license, and I took him out and I bought him a ham sandwich. I said to me, Rabbi, you pay for ham? I said, when you eat it. But then he said, well, but what about the morality of how they kill the animal? Do I need to worry about that?
That is the 7th commandment of the 7, which was given to Noah after the flood. So, yeah, that is a separate concern. It's not the kosher law, it's cruelty to animal law. But the kosher thing, very briefly, there are animals that are inherently kosher and there are animals that are not. which means the animals that are not inherently kosher, no matter how you prepare them, no matter how gentle you are, they're not kosher. You cannot make them edible for a Jew. And then there are those animals that are kosher. Of course, you have to prepare them correctly. You can't eat them alive. And you can't consume the blood. So there's a very prescribed way of how the animal should be killed in the most perfectly painless, quickest, most reliable method. Like one of the problems with shooting the animal is that sometimes you have to shoot them a second time. That should never happen. So the way the kosher animal is slaughtered, there is never a second time. Because the method is so clear, it's so effective, it's instantaneous, and you never have to do it again. So, what makes the kosher animal kosher, even before it's slaughtered? And what makes the non-kosher animal non-kosher, even if you slaughter it correctly? The general rule is we don't eat predatory animals. Animals that eat animals, we don't want to eat because there's a cruelty there that we don't want to ingest. Again, it's not true of all animals. There are animals that are not kosher that are totally peaceful. But as a general rule, we don't consume predatory animals. Birds that eat birds, we don't want to eat it. Fish that eat fish, all fish eat fish. What else are they going to eat? Grass? A non-Jew who says, I don't want to eat predatory animals either. I don't want that effect. That's a good thing. There are some laws of kosher, like not mixing meat and milk. That's too Jewish. That's specifically for Jews, because we don't see any practical effect. It's a divine decree. And if God makes a decree, you follow it. If he didn't, you don't make one up. So if God didn't demand it of the non-Jew, then they shouldn't do it. But anything that has some practical benefit, even if you're not commanded, why wouldn't you help yourself to that benefit? So not eating predatory animals is a pretty good idea. Not eating meat that was taken from an animal while it was still alive, that's a commandment. That's a big one. So it would be interesting to find out what happens in the packing houses. How do they prepare the meat? Is every animal certifiably not alive when they start butchering it? Or do they start butchering it while it's still alive? What's with lobsters? You eat them while they're still alive? I don't know, I'm asking.
You cook them while they're still alive.
And you wait until do you?
I mean, I'm not an expert in this field, but I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, these are serious questions. So any mitzvah that has a tangible benefit, why shouldn't everyone get that benefit? No, you're not commanded, and it wouldn't be a sin if you didn't. But why not gain the benefit? So Having a mezuzah in your house, having a holy book in your house, there are benefits. You're not commanded. But, bringing a little holiness to the atmosphere of the home, why not? Even observing the seventh day, Shabbos. All human beings are commanded to improve the world constantly. The way we observe Shabbos, we're not improving the world for 24 hours. That was purely, strictly a Jewish thing. So a non-Jew should not observe Shabbos the way Jews do, because then they're failing in their prime, what's the word?
Objective.
In their prior commitment of fixing the world. But to treat Shabbos as if it's just a normal day is not right either. Part of the purpose of observing Shabbos is to testify that God created the world in the 6 days and rested on the seventh. Every creature who was created during those 6 days should be testifying. So to make a special meal on Shabbat, a little candlelight on the dining room table, hey, it is a special day. So don't refrain from doing everything useful, like mowing the lawn or whatever it is people do when they have a day off. But something to recognize or to appreciate that, yes, God did create the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. How it became Sunday, I don't know.
A different lecture for a different time. Well, the idea that God needs every member of the human race to do things for God, to make God's world the kind of world that God wants it to be, and that everybody is critical to God's plan, and that everything we do can and should be oriented towards that goal, is the main point of all of this. And I hope that everybody listening has learned as much as I have, because this has been very, very enlightening, and for many, life-changing. So thank you, Tati.
You should also mention that this purpose for which we exist is a daily, constant. Every hour that God gives us, we have the opportunity to improve the world. So it's not like one project in the course of a lifetime. No, it's every day. And the proof that God needs you is you're here. So every hour that God keeps you on earth, it's because there's something we can do to further his vast eternal plan. Some people are so incredible that they see and feel that responsibility hourly. Some even feel it minute by minute. That would make me crazy, but it's awesome that some people can.
And I know some of them, and they're out there right now watching. And yeah, they're special people. So to all of you who have enjoyed this series, if you would consider helping make more such series available to the public, please go to itsgoodtoknow.org, become a monthly sponsor, join the VIPs, simply give a donation. It would all be greatly appreciated. And of course, if you have questions, you can continue to submit them, and we'll see what happens in the future. Thank you, Rabbi Friedman.
Thank you, Rabbi Friedman.
And a Chag Kasher V'Sameach, a joyous, kosher, and meaningful Pesach to everybody.
Good night.